Hey guys, and welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. It's been a jam-packed year thus far. I did promise you guys that we would have a guest on this week's podcast. Unfortunately, we've had to delay a little bit due to circumstances, especially here in the Eastern Cape. Unfortunately, our Wi-Fi and a lot of the signal, especially with the terrible winds we've been having lately, has caused a little bit of a delay. Obviously, our Skype interview wasn't up for the schedule. But anyway, we're not going to stop. Like I said, I promised earlier this year that I'll be trying to do as many of these podcasts as possible because it's just what I love doing. But I do realize there was a couple of complaints on the last episode that my intro is a little bit too long. But unfortunately, there have been some wonderful companies and associations that have donated towards this week's podcast. So bear with me as we get through them. And this week's podcast is proudly brought to you by Right to Bear. Safety first, get protected. Responsibility is in your hands and your loved ones with the best self-defense association in the country. We have wonderful packages custom designed to your needs. Visit www.protectwithbear.com. Next up, some of the more ideal tights I have been using in the market for the past couple of weeks is Stocko. More activity, less pain. Meet the latest tights in the K-Line fleet, introducing the K1 Summit and the K1 Flux. Guys, these tights have been wonderful, especially as far as recovery is concerned, and especially with myself having a lot of rugby injuries. These have been outstanding, out in the bush, and as well as my days off for recovery. Next up is Stanley. Stanley1913.com. Help provide meals for kids. This back to school season, we're donating $5 from every product sold on the Stanley1913.com to leave no kid hungry, up to the value of $50,000. This is an incredible initiative, and Stanley have really up their game as far as products is concerned. I've been very, very happy with the Iceflow Sipper Cup that I have been using as far as the gym's concerned, and I've been incredibly impressed with how wonderful the double side vacuum seals have been working, holding my water extremely cold for some time. Then, of course, the two last but not least, they're kind of becoming a regular on the podcast, Utando Safaris, Africa from a hunter's perspective. Visit www.utandosafaris.com to find out more. .com. Yes, didn't sound right. www.utandosafaris.com to find out more. Custom make your packages for your next safari experience. The price list is downloadable in a PDF form. Remember, we are selling experiences. Come and experience Africa like never before. And then last but not least, of course, the one and only PH Toolbox, helping you make your own adventure. Guys, the PH Toolbox has opened the PH program until the end of the year. So if you feel that you are an outdoor enthusiast and you can contribute to the PH Toolbox in any shape, way, or form, please head along to www.phtoolbox.co.za. This is unfortunately only open to South African residents. However, if you would like to support PH Journals as far as my podcast is concerned, or by purchasing any one of the PH Journals heavy merchandise, you will be donating all proceeds. So all the profit from the PH Journals will be donated to conservation and rhino poaching. Specifically, I would like to speak about the PH Journals Heavyweight Crew T-shirt, as well as the Heavyweight Women's PH Journals shirt, and then finally the PH Journals Africa edition. These three shirts have been manufactured across the world as far as the United States, Europe, and of course Australia is concerned now. So now these shirts will become available within 3 days of ordering to any one of those three countries mentioned. We've partnered with a distribution company in all three of those continents, and they will be distributing our product across the range. So unfortunately, just for now, as we speak, PH Journals Heavyweight Crew Neck T-shirt, Heavyweight Women's PH Journals, and the PH Journals Africa T-shirt. So if you guys would like to go and support myself, the podcast, and as well as conservation and hunting, head along to www.phtoolbox.co.za to find out more. Well, guys, a little bit longer than expected, but I've just been so fortunate to have such wonderful brands come on the show, and I'm feeling extremely blessed. So, without further ado, let's get into this week's podcast. Hey guys, so this week's podcast is a little bit of an interesting one. This question was brought up probably some time ago. I'm almost going back 2 years. I think I have touched a little bit on it, especially this season as far as the fellow deer is concerned. But what is the how does the South African market benefit from having exotics? So firstly, to open the discussion, we need to identify what is an exotic, what classifies as an exotic, and then secondly, how are we going to be handling these sort of situations? So firstly, an exotic, for me personally, I believe that an exotic is anything off the African continent. Roan, sable, black rhino, well, in some parts of South Africa, black rhino, as well as, like tsetse, that sort of stuff, have been introduced into some parts of South Africa just purely on a conservation purpose. And this is a wonderful initiative because, unfortunately, South Africa doesn't have much control from more of their northern, upper northern countries. So trying to focus and manage those herds down here to help that the species doesn't become extinct. And of course, I personally honestly believe that South Africa has got a better platform from educating people more on a conservation point going forward. So it's a very interesting one for me, and it's one that I've taken to heart. But a couple of outfitters and a couple of safari companies in South Africa have got pure exotics such as access deer, red deer, hog deer, scimitar horned oryx, which is still an African species, and it's actually part of CITES at the moment. I'm just trying to think of some of them more. There's like 4-horned sheep. There's a couple of goats. I know there's a few places that have got ibexes as far as Nubian ibexes are concerned, or Arabian ibexes. I think they well known. So anyway, that's just to touch base on some of the exotic species, water buffalo. So for me, I personally think that the way this kind of happened was never, people have said, I read a couple of articles that have said that South Africa had a bit of a trade agreement as far as some species is concerned. Some species were bought here to look after the settlers that came in, and that is true. That is true to a certain point. If we look back at the fellow deer only recently were just listed or acknowledged as one of an African species. You get the African fellow deer now, as far as I'm aware. I did try and find that online, but I couldn't find it anywhere. So yeah, there's still that whole debate about why the fallow deer were brought over here. If you guys want to find out more, head along to that podcast. I think it was done at the start of the season. Well, my one is my personal opinion is that it was brought over to supplement sailors and individuals on the long cruise ships over, where the iron levels and of course boat-borne diseases were prominent inside the ships and stuff. So they needed something. They needed protein rich in iron, rich in certain values, and of course fallow deer being venison, highly rich in iron and stuff. So it kind of supplemented them on the ships coming over. And once they got here, it's kind of the only species they really were familiar with. So they tried to domesticate them, but obviously as they broke out and explored South Africa, a lot of them adapted and have ultimately done extremely wonderful here. So yeah, that's just my personal opinion on the whole thing. But as far as all the other stuff is concerned, let's have a look at it. So if you're looking at the European countries and their specific species that are introduced into South Africa, there's one way that's very popular, or it's kind of the best way to sum it up. I personally think that zoos never had a good castration program. Therefore, a lot of breeding was done within the zoos, and this goes against everything that I believe. Let me just start off by saying that I'm not a fan at all of any zoo. I do believe there's a market for them, but it just, for me, it encourages captive breeding, that sort of stuff. It's not a wonderful setup, and I just believe that with the amount of land and safari institutions, not only in Africa but across the world, there's more than enough space to educate and share safaris with people across the world and educate them on different species and stuff. However, this will mean that you're going to have to get exotics in if you would like the public to be educated about certain species. For instance, Pablo Escobar bought the hippo and the zebras and all that sort of stuff. And now we, as far as I believe, I know they've flooded some parts of South America as far as in the rivers and stuff. And there's a couple of people that have been now summoned to go out and eradicate the species because it's invasive. So yeah, so to clarify everything, I personally believe that it's been bad management from the zoo's perspective, and they've kind of overpopulated in the zoos, and without euthanizing them, they've realized that they could keep their doors open by selling the excess animals. So things like ibexes, axis deer, all those sort of things that were brought over to be placed into zoos to educate the public have now gone into safari companies, and they have used it to their advantage, of course, which is not a bad thing. I'm all for it because I fully am aware, if controlled properly, that those sort of species, those external species from Africa, have got an important part to play in this food chain now that we've kind of created. Meaning that everybody that comes over to South Africa on a regular basis, like they say, once Africa's in your blood, it never stops being in your blood. You just want to keep getting over here. It allows for people that have shot X amounts of species here, especially filling most of their lists up, springback slams, spiraled horse slams, whatever the case may be. And therefore, it's just adding them on a second option, what they can eventually have a look at. However, if you look at history, invasive species is never a good thing to have. You look at different parts of North America as far as the feral hog is concerned, as well as Australia. Australia having some issues now with domesticated cats turning feral. So, and then of course foxes and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, it's one thing to say that these are good for the economy, but is it good for our wildlife? Is it good for lands? Is it good for the farmer? Is it good for all these sort of things? I mean, if we start introducing European boars, and I know there are some places that have started doing that, the damaging effect, the domino effect, if that gets out of control, will be massively damaging for South African economy. So although at the moment we're benefiting off of it, in the future, if you look at it realistically and things do get out of control, unfortunately, this is not going to be something we will be able to control. No matter how many hunters we get over here, no matter how many helicopters we have in the air to try and eradicate these sort of things, as much as we've seen from the North American counterparts, they're struggling. I mean, Texas and those sort of places, I know hog hunting out of a helicopter was one of the fastest growing forms of hunting in, when did I go over to Dallas, was 2017, I think. No, yes, 2017. Which is incredible. I mean, the step that they've taken to try and help, you know, eradicate the problem as well by making a little bit of money out of it. And yet you see videos on the internet of these people trapping 20, 30 hogs at a time, getting rid of them, and it's still not even putting a pin drop in the ocean over there. So from a realistic point of view, let's be wary of what we've got. I know there's a lot of farmers with small camped off areas and stuff, and they do allow a little bit of hunting on them. But making sure that your farm is equipped 100% to hold these animals is incredibly important. So, as far as exotics is concerned, there's a misconception with the color variation. Where does this hold as far as exotics and the conversation we're actually having today? Well, personally, I don't think it has a place, because I think certain color variances do belong, others not so much. I mean, the King's wildebeest and all that sort of stuff. Not the King's, sorry, the Royal. I can't remember. It was a pure white one. I just thought, things are just getting completely out of control, and the perspective of Africa is kind of being lost. But yeah, that's a discussion for a different day as far as the color variance is concerned. However, I can comfortably say that hunting of exotics brought in $2.6 million in 2017 to South Africa, which is a significant amount of money if you look at it from the bigger picture. However, compared to the 200 or whatever, I can't remember, $200 million it brought a couple throughout the whole industry. 2.6 is just a mere 1% of that. So, you really, if we had to compare apples with apples, yes, does it have a place? A very, very small place in the industry. And what ultimately are we benefiting from it? Well, there's two things. Of course, the economy benefits in a small way. And then secondly, education. I think with a world that is so connected at the moment, educating one another with physical looking, touching, smelling, seeing is something of a rare value. So to be able to take your daughter or your child out into these institutions, these safari companies, and educate them with a North American species or a European species, as they can feel, touch, smell these specific animals, is something very, very special and unique. And I think it's kind of getting lost as the world gets more and more connected, is because these things aren't being valued as much. However, it does take away from the sense, myself personally, to go over to Europe and go on a United Kingdom photographic safari, because number one, I wouldn't know where to start. I wonder if there's any institutions that do it. I know there's a lot of hunting camps, but number two, having a roe deer in your sights and something like that is special, but it's not significant, because we can see a couple of people online on the having a shot at a roe deer or seeing it go through the land. So it's kind of lost that impact, and that's what worries me, is especially with the connection with this whole VAR and virtual reality movement that's happening, especially during lockdown. I mean, I heard there was a couple of companies that came out with this virtual reality safaris and that sort of stuff, which is wonderful, but is it not doing more damage than not? So, yeah. As far as I'm concerned, there's this very delicate balance between having the correct species, what benefit it plays as far as the economy is concerned, and when I mean economy, ultimately I want an institution or an industry to create as many jobs as possible. So that's what I mean. And by having these unique breeds, takes caring. You need people to check fences, so there's job opportunities there. You need people to feed them on a regular basis, special diets, that sort of stuff, because ultimately our food, our grazing, our browsing is not going to be the same as a European or North American side of things. However, there are some species that do really, really well. and there's some that don't. They do need supplementation as far as pellets and all that sort of stuff is concerned. So the knock-on effect is huge. So as far as the economy goes, it is a benefit. And as far as, conservation goes, I kind of see it as like a catch-22 at the moment. It's pretty decent because you're inviting a lot of people coming over here. I mean, I know in South Africa you can shoot some parts of South Africa. You can shoot an axis deer for, I think it's $1,500 or something like that. I don't think they get as big as what the guys get in Texas and stuff, but I know Texas prices are upwards of $3,000, which is a significant price difference. I mean, you can fly over, shoot one, and fly back for almost the same price as what you're going to be able to shoot one that side. So at the moment, it's doing its job. At the moment, it is beneficial, but with a massive but, if these species get out, what harm is it going to do? What competitiveness is it going to do? I mean, you look at feral hogs, if they're going to start competing against the likes of our bush pig, the likes of our warthogs, I mean, we can almost forget we'll have those species around if they do get out. And this is something extremely concerning. So, with that being said, is it still as beneficial as what we think it is? My honest opinion, I would much rather not have it than have it. But unfortunately, it's become part of the DNA in South Africa. It's become part of the DNA across the world. If you look at likes of Texas, I mean, there's more tigers in Texas at the moment than there are in the wild, which is a little bit scary. So it's kind of giving that zoo effect now. People are breeding in captivity, which is a little bit against my morals, ethics, and values. However, for some people, there is a place for it. So that's just where I sit with that point. Exotics, I'm one for it at the moment, but with extreme careful planning and management. The minute we drop our guard and we lose our focus on specific species, we're looking for trouble. And unfortunately, it's not us who's going to suffer at the end of the day. It's our wildlife, and I'm all for preserving and conserving our wildlife. So just keep that in mind. If you are coming over and you would like to shoot an exotic, by all means, just understand that it does take careful planning to manage those specific species. But I'm sure everybody across the world, as far as the UK, North America, Australia, everywhere else is concerned, I'm sure people are finding that out very, very quickly. And this is why conservation is so important, ladies and gentlemen, because without education, without knowledge, our guard can slip very, very quickly. Well, guys, that's a nice little short and sweet podcast. I just felt it was out there. We needed to discuss it. I'm not too, I don't want to get too involved. There's some delicate numbers over there. As far as the knock-on effects concerned, some companies that have invested into pellets and supplementation for specifically exotic animals, and I don't mean to destroy their businesses or anything like that, because they're obviously just evolving as the times in South Africa have. But if you do come over and you do fancy shooting yourself a nice axis deer or hog deer or whatever the case may be, by all means, just understand that it's got to come from a good place, and you're doing your part for conservation, so you can work in Africa and South Africa, most importantly. So, guys, once again, just to close it off, if you guys would like to support my conservation efforts as well as this podcast, head along to www.phtoolbox.co.za. Head over to the PH Journals merchandise section, and there you'll find the PH Journals Heavyweight Crew T-shirt, the Heavyweight Women's PH Journals shirt, as well as PH Journals Africa. And if you guys would like to support me, as well as conservation and rhino poaching, go along, purchase one of those T-shirts as a gift for yourself, for your family, whatever the case may be, and enjoy it. All proceeds will go to conservation as well as rhino poaching. just a small way I can give back to an industry that has given me so much. Remember, shipping will be done in no less or no more than 3 days on these specific shirts. We've partnered with a distribution company across the world, North America, Europe, and Australia, and looking forward to seeing you guys in the near future. So, from myself, Dylan Love at PH Journals, I just want to say thank you to everybody that supported me. Once again, thank you to this week's podcast, Right to Bear, Stocko, Stanley, and Utando Safaris, as well as the PH Toolbox. If you are, happy hunting. Until then, stay safe, stay blessed, stay humble. We'll catch up with you guys soon. Cheers.